Hello and welcome back to our discussion of osmoregulation. In this video, we will be talking about vasopressin and water balance. Okay, so remember in the last video, I talked about this series of events that happen as the filtrate moves through the nephron. I want to emphasize again that sort of in the half, like the first half of the nephron, so proximal tubule, loop of Henle, um, those processes are automatic. They're not regulated in any way, okay? But as we get to the distal nephron, also known as the distal tubule and the collecting duct, we are going to selectively reabsorb or secrete molecules based on the body's needs at that time, okay? In this video, we're going to focus on water reabsorption, okay? So I'm going to start by asking you these questions right here. How would you create dilute urine, and under what circumstances might you want to create dilute urine? And secondly, how would you create concentrated urine, and under what circumstances would you want to do that? Okay, so go ahead and hit pause and come back when you're ready. Okay, so thinking about how you would create dilute urine, what you would do is you would want to not reabsorb water as your filtrate moves through the tubule, right? So you want to keep that water there so that you can have urine that has a lot of water in it. When would you want to do it? You would probably want to do that when you have an excess of water in your body. So like if you just drank a whole bunch of water, maybe you have a high blood volume, you'd want to get rid of some water. If you have high blood pressure, usually you'll want to get rid of some water. Those kinds of circumstances, okay? To create concentrated urine, what you would do is you would want to reabsorb water, right? So you want to absorb water back into your body so that very little of it leaves the nephron and very little of it ends up in the urine. When would you want to do that? Basically, when you are in a position where you want to conserve water. So if you're dehydrated, or maybe you have a really high salt concentrations in your body and you need to keep your water in order to maintain osmotic balance, okay? So those are the sort of the situations, okay? Water reabsorption in the body is regulated by a hormone called vasopressin, okay? Vasopressin is also known as anti-diuretic hormone, or ADH, okay? It's actually also referred to as AVP, or arginine vasopressin, but I don't think that term is used as often. You might remember that vasopressin is one of the two hormones that are secreted by the posterior pituitary. So that's what's shown here. Remember, in the posterior pituitary, we are secreting hormones that were made by the hypothalamus and then transported down to the posterior pituitary. Our other hormone made by the posterior pituitary, you might remember, is oxytocin, which is a reproductive hormone. Okay, and what vasopressin does is that it stimulates water reabsorption. So it's going to tell the body to reabsorb water, tell the kidneys to reabsorb water. Another way to think about it is that it's going to inhibit diuresis. So diuresis is the removal of excess water through urine. So that's where the name ADH comes from, anti-diuretic hormone. We are going to stop the process of removing that water from the body, okay? And the way that it works is that it inserts pores, water pores, into the wall of the collecting duct. Okay, so in the next several slides, I will be showing you this mechanism, but before that, we're going to take a quick little detour here. Okay, I want to point out that vasopressin is a peptide hormone, and I want you to rack your brain and see if you can remember, based on the fact that it's a peptide hormone, would you expect it to bind to membrane receptors or intracellular receptors? would you expect it to stimulate fast cellular changes or slower genomic changes? So take a moment to think about that. Hit pause if you need to. Okay, so hopefully you remember that peptide hormones are going to bind membrane receptors and that they are going to stimulate fast cellular changes. So they're going to do things like activate signal transduction cascades. And that is what we are going to be seeing in the coming slides. Okay, so now let's take a look at how vasopressin works. Before I do that, I just want to orient you to this figure. So here's our collecting duct lumen. Okay, this is the wall of the collecting duct. Here's our apical membrane, our basolateral membrane, and then here is our peritubular capillary that's going to pick up whatever gets brought out here into the interstitial space. Okay, I also want to point out that we have water pores here in the basolateral membrane. Okay, our water pores are called aquaporins. Okay, so they're here in the basolateral membrane, although it's not shown in this figure. However, we do not have water pores in the apical membrane. In addition to that, I want to point out that we do have some vesicles inside of these epithelial cells of the collecting duct. And in these vesicles, we have aquaporin water pores. Okay, so these vesicles are just kind of hanging out and they're holding these water pores. Okay, so let's take a look at what happens. Okay, oh, one more thing I just kind of want to point out. If we want to reabsorb water, we're going to need to move water from the collecting duct lumen through this cell and then out to the interstitial space here. Okay, so if we want to reabsorb water, we secrete vasopressin. What happens with vasopressin is, remember, it's a hormone. It's going to be in the bloodstream. It's going to start by binding a membrane receptor because it is a peptide hormone. Okay. Once we bind that membrane receptor, we're going to activate a signal transduction cascade. Okay. And then the result of that signal transduction cascade is that we have these vesicles fuse with the apical membrane of the collecting duct wall. Okay. As a result of that fusion, we end up inserting these water pores, these aquaporin water pores, into the apical membrane here. Once we have water pores in the apical membrane, then water is free to cross the apical membrane, and then it crosses the basolateral membrane through those channels that were already there, and then we have reabsorbed our water. Okay, so that's how we reabsorb water in response to vasopressin.